National College Football Roundup. Whoa. 65-7. My goodness. What an epic ass whooping. The biggest margin of victory in a title game. The biggest margin of victory in any bowl game ever. Said it was over so quickly. So quickly.
It was brutal. Very quickly. It started really bad for TCU. They had that false start, I think, to start the game off. And it just never got better from that moment on. They did hit on the one deep play and ended up getting that touchdown drive. And I was like, okay, they're going to be able to do that all game. We've got something here, but nope, that was it.
Even that play, I was watching the game with my wife and she was like, oh, that's good. Like, and I was like, it's literally just a busted coverage. Like the only reason, and the thing that stood out to that about that play to me, Duggan underthrew Davis by like 15 yards.
I know it. Yep.
I mean, and that was the thing for me is, man, I felt for Max Duggan. He'd had such an incredible season. He played his worst game of the year in the national championship game. And of course, Georgia's defense had a lot to do with that. But even the first drive of the game, like there's 2 throws to be made on that first drive of the game. He just misses. And he looked off. He looked rattled. He didn't play well. And they needed him to be special. And he was bad.
Yeah.
He was bad. And it broke my heart for the kid because I think you and I, we love the way he plays. I love how physically he plays the quarterback position. But man, that was not good, not a good performance by the Heisman runner-up. Not good at all.
It wasn't. You mentioned he underthrew on that deep ball. He missed Quentin Johnson, had him on a deep post, and terrible throw gets intercepted. What should have been a massive play in TCU's favor is just a horrible throw and an easy interception, and it was bad. And I think that clearly the timing got to him quickly, and a much more difficult time being able to escape and get out of the pocket and, outrun some guys around the edges. Just didn't have the ability to do a lot of the things that he had done to where, he feels like he's got the defense on their heels. Like they never got over the hump. Like they were the ones that were in a panic the entire football game.
Yeah. And I think there's that entire game can be summed up in one play. In my mind, I mean, you look at, and that was just, I mean, Georgia just kept putting it on them. My God. But I think there's one play that defines that game, and it's early, and it's the Darius Davis speed sweep that he ends up fumbling. Gets it on the jet sweep, inexcusably has the ball in his inside arm. But the reason he's got the ball in his inside arm on that, Ted, is he has never in his life been caught on that play. How many times when we were preparing for the OU TCU game, how many times did we see them run that play on tape and Darius Davis just turns the corner and is running down the sideline?
Yep.
And so he's got the ball in the inside arm, which everyone that carries the football in the history of football knows you're not supposed to do. And he's running thinking, I'm going to turn this corner. Nope. That Georgia safety comes flying downhill, catches him, and takes the football from him. And so I think if you look at that game, like that's the play that defined the difference between TCU and Georgia. I mean, Georgia was faster, stronger, they were more physical, and they played with greater attention to detail. And that, I think every one of those points, you can see it in that play.
Well, yes, no doubt. And I think and this is a somewhat obvious statement, but it's worth mentioning anyways. That Georgia probably defensively did less than anyone they played all year. It looked like a super traditional defense, except it looked like they were playing with 12 guys because everyone was in a really good position at all times, proper leverage, and everyone is so athletic. You don't have to do a lot. If you've got all the guys that are lined up there in the right spot, you can get there with 3 or 4 guys up front. You don't have to do a whole lot. They did a couple of some of the pressures where they show the double A gap and have one of the guys pop out. Georgia's been doing that. They did that in 2017 whenever we played them in the Rose Bowl.
Listen, that was the thing when I was playing in college. Yeah. I loved Fowler was like, this trend in college football. I was like, trend? Double A gap pressure's been around since like 2009.
Yeah. It was really big in the NFL before that. And, you know, some of that stuff started coming over. We did it in Jacksonville. Mel Tucker, was the defensive coordinator when I was in Jacksonville, and he went to Georgia. They were doing that stuff in Georgia. But there was some of that. But that is so easy to run. It puts a lot of pressure on a quarterback that's worried about you, right? Whenever he starts to think about the defense and the people getting to him, you see 2 backers, tough in the A gaps, the clock is already starting to move faster before he snapped the ball. So they were just disciplined, athletic, tackled well. They just kind of overwhelm you with guys that are really athletic and they're in the right spot. That's tough to beat.
They made a big deal of the simulated pressure stuff and kind of the elaborate pressure stuff on the broadcast. But the reason that they could do that is they were dominating on first and second down. Mm-hmm. Just winning at the point of attack, playing physical, disciplined defense, right? With superior athletes.
Yep.
So that's why they could get to all that stuff. And then got to give Stetson Bennett his credit, man. How good was he?
Woo.
I mean, the guy, when the lights are brightest, the guy delivers. Now, everything was working for Georgia offensively. I mean, TCU's defense, they just had no answers. I was really surprised they had so many struggles getting lined up. I mean, they see tempo all the time in the Big 12, and they couldn't get lined up.
And they run the 3-3-5 that is lined up the same exact way every single snap typically.
Yeah, that was strange. And Georgia hit some big plays, right? With the sugar huddle, went fast, and TCU, they just busted in the secondary. So that was surprising. That was probably the most surprising thing in the game for me, was that TCU's defense struggled with that as much as they did. But Stetson Bennett was awesome. He operated that offense extremely well. Now, everything in the run game was working. Everything in the pass game was working, but he used his legs as a weapon. I'm telling you, man, that dude is faster than people think.
Yeah, he's got some quickness to him. Reminds me a little bit of Chandler Morris. He's got that similar type of frame. I think Chandler Morris is probably even faster than Stetson Bennett, but he's just dangerous enough to where if you forget about him in the run game, he's going to make some big plays on you.
I thought, and a lot of people are like, oh, he's 25 years old and all this stuff. Hey, it is what it is. But I thought he made really good decisions in the passing game. I thought he made quick decisions in the passing game. It's, you can make quick decisions when guys are running wide open. That's not overly complicated. But the one play that stood out to me where I was like, okay, this guy is absolutely dialed in to what the defense is trying to do to him and what they want to do offensively, was when D. Winters came off the slot untouched on that traditional slot pressure, and Stetson Bennett knew he was coming, could feel it, baited him, spun out, ran for a first down. Mm-hmm. I was like, damn, this kid, I mean, that's like Aaron Rodgers stuff.
Yep.
Right? Like, I was like, this guy is seeing it so clearly, and he's feeling it. And that was the play where I was like, this game was already over, but TCU doesn't have a chance with the way that this guy is playing. I mean, he was fantastic.
Well, and that's 2 championship games in a row where he's been fantastic. Some of the dimes that he threw in the last national championship were really impressive. That's big time. That's big time for him. And yeah, he's 25, but experience matters, man. The older you can get in college sports, you have such a huge advantage over your competition. There's really no other sport like it, to where you've got you've essentially got boys against men at some position matchups. You know, you're talking about sometimes as young as 18 years old going up against a guy possibly as old as 24, 25 years old. Like, that is a world of difference in just like what your body is prepared to do. So experience matters, and that's why, you know, Venables continues to try and get a little bit older, more experience on defense and just on the football team in general.
Yeah, I felt bad for TCU because it was an amazing season. I mean, that group, Sonny Dykes and those players, they should be extremely proud of the season that they had. I mean, what a fantastic run, but to have it end that way, in that fashion, unfortunately, that's how 2022 is going to be remembered for TCU. Right? When you get embarrassed like that, history is what it is. Like, that's how that team's going to be remembered. Unfortunately, they're not going to be remembered for significantly outplaying that Michigan team.
Yeah.
It's going to be, oh my God, do you remember what happened to him in the title game? That sucks because, man, they were 5-7 a year ago, and under a first-year head coach went to the damn national championship game. First Big 12 team to win a CFP game. And I just, I thought they were going to lose, but man, I wish it wouldn't have been like that. That was brutal.
Yeah, it's brutal because it brings out all of the horrible takes.
Oh, man.
Oh, it's just like instantly, well, they shouldn't have been there. Well, it's clear that Ohio State was the second best team, and it just that type of stuff drives me insane. Whatever. Yeah, they deserve to be there. They whipped an undefeated Michigan team that was really good and had pounded Ohio State in their house. Absolutely deserved to be there. But it wasn't, I mean, at the end of it, and I think I saw you tweet it out, like, the championship rings are going to, or the rings for this season are going to look odd for TCU.
I think you just have to go with Fiesta Bowl champs. Right?
Right.
You can't, because what, Big 12 runner-up and national runner-up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what a weird way for their season. They end up losing 2 out of their last 3. Yep. And you're like, this is a historically great season for the program. You didn't win your conference. So I think you just got to go Fiesta Bowl champs on there, right? That's what you have to do.
Probably good to do that. But yeah, I don't think it was not a good result. It's not indicative of what type of football team TCU is. I think Georgia's clearly a better team than TCU, but they're not 65-7 better, right?
Yeah.
They just, it was just it snowballed on them.
I think I want to make something very clear. I don't think anyone was beating that version of Georgia on Monday night.
Right. Yeah.
Not Bama, not Ohio State. I think they win by 2 or 3 scores against anybody. But yeah, it shouldn't have been that bad. Like, it was, you're right. It snowballed on them. And I saw some people debating this, saw some TCU fans talking about it. It's like, well, I'd rather lose like that than to lose in like a heartbreaking fashion. What? No. Give me the heartbreaking loss by a field goal at the end of the game. Give me what happened to Ohio State against Georgia, as opposed to what TCU just went through against Georgia. Because no, like, people that are saying that are insane. Like, give me the heartbreaking loss that haunts me for the rest of my life. I do not. Don't give me that embarrassment, man. There's no way. I don't know how people can say that. That's ridiculous to say.
Well, I think it's ridiculous for everyone to say, except for, say, like, the kicker for Ohio State is like, I'd rather lose 65-7 than lose in heartbreaking fashion.
Yeah, that's it. Fair point.
Like, there's a handful of people to where that's not the case, but generally speaking, yes, I think you were right.
And just kind of the last thought on the game, as it pertains to Oklahoma football, as I was sitting and watching Georgia go up and down the field, I was more convinced than ever that OU going to the SEC is the correct decision. And that the only way OU is going to have a chance moving forward of winning a title, especially in an expanded college football playoff era, the only way they're going to be able to win a title in that system is to be in the SEC and compete against that type of talent and to stack recruiting classes and be able to say, hey, we're in the SEC, best conference in all of college football, to use that on the recruiting trail to get bigger, faster, stronger across the board. I mean, just because if you're going to play, and you're not playing Georgia every week, I understand that, but the standard at OU is to go and compete for national championships. And we all watched the OU TCU game, right? And there was a gap between OU and TCU. And I know Dylan Gabriel got hurt, but there was a gap. And you saw what TCU looked like against Georgia. So there's a lot of ground to make up, man. And I think the SEC move is essential if Oklahoma football wants to truly be on an elite level in the sport.
Yep. No, I agree. And they need to be prepared, and they need to strike while the iron's hot whenever they do eventually make that move, because I think there's going to be a boost in recruiting that comes with going to the SEC. And if you can capitalize on that, take advantage of it, I think it could propel Oklahoma to some really nice heights. But if you don't and you struggle, you could fall into a bad spot pretty quickly. There's been really good programs in the SEC that have fallen into tough spots that took them, as far as like recruiting cycles, generations of coaching tenures and recruiting cycles to try and pop out of. Like Tennessee just now is getting their head above water. Florida, I don't think Florida still hasn't had their head above water for any consistent amount of time after the Urban Meyer situation. So it's a difficult conference that if you don't take advantage of some opportunities you have early, you could just kind of float around in the middle forever.
Right. I'm going to throw, and I would say no one would consider us hot take guys, right? I'm going to throw this out there and see what you think. Mm-hmm. As I watch TCU get destroyed, this thought popped into my head. And you and I, we have talked about how much we love the Big 12 Conference. We've got Big 12 championship rings. Those rings are never going to say SEC champs, ever. Part of me thinks that, especially expanded playoff, OU and Texas move on. I think it's very possible the Big 12 team never wins a national title again.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be very it would have changed. I think I probably would have said the same thing, but I would have been way more hesitant had TCU not just like they didn't have to win that game. If it would have been a really tight game that looked like TCU had opportunities to win it and came up short, like even that could have convinced me maybe that TCU could really build on some momentum here and carry this through and see what happens. But I tend to agree. And even if it was to happen, it would just have to occur with all of the stars aligning perfectly. Several schools down, maybe like a massive upset happens, and like the number one team goes down in a 12-team playoff against an opponent that they're a huge favorite. Like you would have to have some stuff like that occur, right?
Yeah, but then like you look at what the Big 12 is going to look like once OU and Texas leave, right? TCU, I think a lot of people believe is positioned to be the dominant force in the conference. A lot of people have talked about Houston, right? But think of who those two schools are recruiting against. Guys are, and listen, I love the Big 12, but the best players in the state of Texas, they're not going to choose TCU and Houston over Texas, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Bama, LSU. Like, it's just not going to happen, man. I don't think UCF all of a sudden is going to start pulling in recruits over Florida and Florida State and Miami. Like, I don't
They,
see it. You know what I
they
mean?
would
Like, I
have
just
to chip away. They would have to chip away at that over an extended amount of time with like super, super high level, consistent football. Like out of a 8-year span, they make the college football playoff like 6 out of the 8 years. Like
yeah.
that's how you would ever be able to really start to chip away at any of the like the Florida based recruiting stuff.
And maybe, and I know a lot of people think, hey, Joe McGuire, Texas Tech, he's going to get a ton of talent, but are a bunch of kids going to choose Lubbock over Austin and College Station and Norman? Like, I just, you know what I mean? I just don't see with what it's going to take to win a college football playoff and a 12-team playoff. I just don't think a Big 12 team in the new Big 12, once OU and Texas move on, I just don't think a Big 12 team is going to be able to stack enough talent year after year after year to win a national title. I just think it's going to be way too difficult.
Well, I will say this, like the one hope that they have is the possibility, the real possibility that a 12-team playoff starts to spread the talent out a little bit more. You know, I think the 14 playoff has, I think one of the unintended consequences is the concentration of players going to the schools that have been able to make it every year, like early on. Like since this thing started, like the teams that were the best early on, whenever the playoffs started, really capitalize on moving to that format, right? Where they get all of the attention, all of the talk, the media focus is all right there on those teams. I think the 12-team playoff has a chance to spread some of that out, but it will take a really long time. It's a slow moving car. I mean, Georgia has, 5 recruiting classes that have all been either number 1, number 2, or number 3. All of those guys are sitting there on campus. Like it takes a long time for people to start to chip away at that and be able to get your roster anywhere close. I mean, it takes years of high level consistent recruiting, and it will take years under a 12-team playoff for, I think, some of the talent to spread out on the curve a little bit.
Yeah, the geographic disadvantage for the teams in the new Big 12. I don't.
It's gonna be tough.
I want the Big 12.
Be a great conference.
I think it's going to be the most entertaining, the most fun, and the most competitive conference in all of college football to watch when it goes to those 12 teams. I really do. I think it's going to be incredibly entertaining. I don't think one of those teams is going to be able to go through a college football playoff where they got to beat, let's say they got to beat Ohio State in round 1. Then they got to beat Bama. Then they got to beat Georgia. I just don't see it, man.
Better be trying to get a bye. Yeah, it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
It's, and that honestly though, that goes for every conference.
I would say everyone but like Ohio State, right? Like, because Ohio State, now we'll see what USC and Oregon end up doing out there. And USC going to the Big Ten, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that affects their recruiting and what their roster makeup looks like. But yeah, the SEC has dominated college football, man. And it's very true. It's very possible that we get to a 12-team playoff, you're seeing 2, maybe 3 teams in the Final Four in college football from the SEC each year. Like, it's possible.
Yeah.
Hopefully Oklahoma's part of it, man. A lot.
And if anyone wants to have any type of, like, teams have to start winning. And I know it's a huge ask and it's a tough ask, but teams are going to have to start beating them. I mean, that's the only way that you change it, is teams are going to have to start beating them when they have their opportunity. Ohio State, like, I hear everyone talking about how great that Georgia team was, and they were. That Georgia team was fantastic. But Ohio State, they're beat. They're dead to rights. Like, everyone on the sidelines in tears, they're crying. It's over. And they missed the field goal. Like, if college football wants to catch up to that conference, you can't miss those field goals. You know, like, you got to be able to beat them whenever you have your chance.
No, I completely agree. It's my hope that OU's in this mix, baby, moving forward. That's, I mean, let's be real. That's what we really care about.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just, yeah, it dawned, that thought of, like, the Big 12 not really having a team that is going to be able to truly compete kind of dawned on me. I would say about early second quarter of that football game, where I was like, oh man,
yeah,
this could be really difficult. So we'll see. I'm not trying to be depressing when it comes to the future of the Big 12. I'm just trying to be realistic.
It's realistic. Man. I think everyone sees that.
Yeah. All right. Let's get to call your shot. We saved it for this portion because we asked you guys, how did UGA's destruction of TCU make you feel about OU's move to the SEC? And Mark Crenshaw chimed in. He said, Georgia has back-to-back national championships because they stack talent class after class. When Coach Venables and the staff are able to do that, the product on the field will take care of itself. We're not where we need to be, and we're not where we're gonna be. #Boomer.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty fair assessment from Mark.
Well said. I think that this is going to be a big developmental year. Last year was transitional. This is going to be developmental. I think that's going to help them. Obviously, we'll see what it turns out to be. But as you look at it right now, a really, really promising recruiting class, and they've got some really, really promising recruiting prospects for the next 24 class that's coming through, and specifically on the defensive line. So you got to continue to do really well in recruiting. You got to do well in the transfer portal, because, we aren't going to beat Georgia, at least not for a long time, to get our roster to where it's comparable to theirs. So in the meantime, what do you got to do? You got to supplement with some transfer portal guys at, some positions of need year in, year out. And those needs will probably change around a little bit, but that's the one place that you can continue to try and keep pace, is by adding more experienced talent on the top end while bringing in some really good young recruiting classes and developing those guys.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And this last one comes from Ethan Price, who says, I never felt good about OU's chances against Georgia or Bama right now, especially this year. But at the end of the day, I feel like going to that conference and going against that physical of competition week after week will serve us better in the long term than Big 12. I don't think anyone would argue that.
I totally agree. And, there is, they have the, everyone expects the SEC to play much better defense, right? And whenever I think everyone has that mentality, and it's talked about, and the drum is constantly pounded, I think they call the games differently. I think they let them play on the perimeter a little bit more. There's definitely more talent there, but the pace of play, the style of play alone helps you play better defense, if that makes sense. Now, Obviously, the teams that have really good offense, they put up big numbers, and they're going to go fast, and they're going to dial up, big passing plays and running plays. The good offenses there are really good too. But it's just a little bit different style that I think will help you play some more solid defense.
And kind of to tie that into recruiting, you and I, we've been trying to tell people, hey, Big 12 is it's a good brand of football. They're playing defense in the conference now. It's not just, air raid all over the place, everyone throwing it around. We've been trying to fight that reputation for years, right?
Mm-hmm.
TCU did not help things on Monday night.
No.
Every SEC coach that's in a recruiting battle with a Big 12 school is going to say, hey, you watch that game, right? Like, that's the difference.
Yeah.
So
and it's the same thing. Like, I like the 3-3-5 defense. I think that it's smart for a lot of people to run it, but you don't see it at the next level, at least not consistently. Like, teams may run some concepts off of it, but that's what you're saying. It's like, if you run a 3-3-5, if you're a defensive lineman, you get paid to get to the quarterback. Like, that's how you get drafted high. That's how you make money in the NFL, by getting to the quarterback. It's hard to get to the quarterback whenever you're lined up head up on guys and there's only 3 down. It's not the scheme that you want to try and get drafted high on the defensive line. And that's going to be used against the Big 12 teams.
no doubt about it.